Got it. There we go. All right. Good
Hello,
afternoon,
hello.
everybody. Good to see you. It's been 2 weeks since we've been away. We've had a lot of great experiences while we were gone. Went to Disney with the family. Incredible time. And then last week, I was at the family mastermind event they were having in Jacksonville, Florida, and then had an opportunity to stop by Ron the Grand's office, get on their live 4-day event that they were doing. We did some deal analyzing. It was a really, really great time. Threw in a heck of an idea on one of the deals one of their students were working on, and hopefully that works out well for them because it's really cool. So today's topic that we're going to dive into is a little bit of a recap of what we've been talking about, but is how to buy these houses, create a finance or even cash, it don't matter, but how we're doing it virtually, because we do both. We do them virtually. I would say, I don't know, I probably in the last 2 years have gone to like 3 or 4 houses, and we do a handful every month. So every one of these deals that we're doing virtually, a lot of them are right here. I've got one we just closed on it last week. It's 15 minutes from where I live. I never went inside the house. And to be honest with you, on some of these houses, you're much better off buying them virtually, considering if you do go inside of them and you see what they're like, you'd be happy that you go see a lot of this from pictures and videos. And we're going to go over that process right now. But the one thing I'm going to warn all of you on is when you do buy virtually, here's one thing you cannot do virtually is smell the property. Forewarning, you can't smell it. So some tips that I've learned, if you see pets in the background in some of the pictures or videos, or a dog crate in the background, or they have 5 dogs, guess what? It might smell like dog in there, right? You talk to somebody who wants to sell their house and it's the old cat lady or cat guy, and they've got 58 cats living in the house. Guys, what do you think it's going to smell like in there? Okay, the pictures are never going to give it justice compared to the smell. So just a forewarning, Jen and I have been surprised, and not the way we were hoping, more times than not. Although there was 1 or 2 houses that we bought, there were pretty houses in pretty neighborhoods that we walked in and we're like, looked at each other like, wow, it smells great in here already.
Like 1 or 2.
But those are usually far and few between. So we're going to go over how to fix that too. Okay. So a lot of what we do is we do all of our marketing through social media. We do cold calling. We've done mailers. Jen and I have been talking about doing another mailer because one of our students, which we're going to share her success story very shortly, just landed a deal in our own town, Rochester, New York. She doesn't even live there. She lives 6 hours away in New York City, guys. She sent out a mailer, and not only did she do a mailer 6 hours from where she lives, she did it in my own and Jen's backyard because I told her it's a good spot. We know a lot of buyers. We know a lot of realtors and attorneys. It's a good place to go. So she sends out a mailer. She gets a seller who reaches out to her, says, yes, I will sell you my property. She gets me on a closing call with this seller. I talked to him several times. We lock up the property for $92,000. Mom's house needs a good clean out in Henrietta. It's a town in the suburbs, not far from like colleges and things like that, if you don't know where that area is. So we figured that ARV fixed up, nice conditions, probably worth 180-ish, maybe hit 200 in nice shape. In its current condition, because it's that grandma's house, right? It was dated. We figured it'd be worth 140. She gets it locked up for 92,000. So the game was there to buy it, clean it out, and just list it right away on the market, which is one of my favorites. And she accepted an offer. She texted Jen and myself. The first offer she got was for 165 cash. No inspections, with an escalation clause up to, I forgot what the number was, but then she received an offer for 205 cash for the property. The market's still wacky, guys, in some places, right? So she netting close to $90,000 on that one deal as a mailer. What did she do? She took direction well. She sent out a mailer. She got the folks who reached out to her. She got me on a closing call, not once, but I think 3 or 4 times, building up rapport. This was not just one phone call and the deal was done, right? Seller wanted more, but we had to make sure with the amount of repairs that we needed. And there's no way to anticipate the market was going to do what it did, especially in the way it's going now. But after doing due diligence, even the realtor, who I know very well, says, I think this is probably worth close to 200 grand in top shape. I think we'll sell it for close to maybe 140, 150. It got 205 cash, just blows my mind, but you never know. So good news for her. Merry Christmas, but she's about to get a big old check. So how did she do the deal? Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about, because I don't like talking about hypotheticals. I like talking about actual deals that we're currently doing or have recently done, not a deal that we did 15 years ago. Although, did we learn a lot back then? Sure. There wasn't none of this stuff going on virtually. Now with technology and COVID helping us so much, we're used to getting on Zoom, like we all are here. We're used to getting on FaceTime. And these little cell phones, wherever mine is, are the most handiest little things ever now, guys. We could take photos and have them directly sent to you. I could do live videos. I could do all types of stuff, right? So what we are doing is once we talk to a seller and it sounds like we are on to something, I do not go look at that property, period. We tell them flat off, this sounds good to me. And now to go forward, I need to see photos and some videos. So what I try to do is have our person who was at the house, the seller, take a handful of 15 to 20-second videos, swiping videos, send. I don't need a 6-minute video they'll never send. I need 10, 15-second videos, kitchen, bathroom, bedrooms, outside, things like that. These 15-second videos, they could text you easily. Do I need to see all the little details of pulling out every drawer? No, I don't. I don't care about that. I need to see the swipe of the kitchen, swipe of bathrooms, garage, all of the things. Okay. Then I'm going to also have them send me some photos, but I could also take photos from their short little videos if I'm going to sell the property later on, because I'm going to either turn it into a rental, or I'm going to assign it, or I'm going to put in one of our tenant buyers. And all of these photos that I have are what we're going to use, the best of the group, to repost them to. So this is what we're going to do. So if the house needs work, right, and it's one of these, fixer uppers, and we're going to get a lot of the photos, do I care if I did a walkthrough or not? No, because I'm going to assume it's going to need a roof from the pictures. I'm going to calculate that in my equation. I'm going to assume it's going to need a bathroom because they took the 15-second video and I could see it's disgusting. Right? I wouldn't shower in there. No, none of you would either. So the last one we looked at, the shower and toilet were completely black. Do I need to do a walkthrough of that bathroom to know that? Right? So we don't. I just want that video. I want to be able to calculate that in my equations. That's where I'm putting in our offering. Okay. If they choose to move forward and all of that sounds good, the one caveat I put on my purchase and sale agreement is that we have a 21 due diligence period. So you might want to write this down if you don't already. You might not. We write a 21-day due diligence period. So the due diligence period means, okay, we're agreeing on these price and terms and everything sounds good. And I've got 21 days to send over my inspectors, my contractors, any of my subs, maybe somebody I'm assigning it to, whoever it is, I've got 21 days. So for an example, now I've got 21 days to either send a contractor through there to give me a quick report. Now, Jen will testify when we do a contractor report, I think there's like 18 questions. I don't have them do the full inspection of the property and come up with a list, right? I just need to know what the roof looks like, windows, kitchens, bathrooms, things like that. If I'm wholesaling the property, I don't even bother with that. I just send buyers to go look at it. A cash deal, go look at it. And the market will speak for itself. However, I will tell you, do we probably lose deals from maybe not pricing it too low? Probably do. But I will tell you, on the deals that we do, the cash deals that we make, we dispo those. I don't have to go back to my seller and try to renegotiate because we locked it up too high. And I see a lot of folks right now, especially with the market turning, that's becoming a challenge because for the last few years, sellers have expected high values for their houses and they're still worth a lot, but they're definitely turning down. So where I'm looking at, and I'm explaining to a seller on the phone, if I were to buy this property now, I'm probably 30 days to close, depending on where we live. Some of these renovations might take 60, some take 90, some take even longer, depending on how much you're doing. So if I'm not closing right now till mid-January, and I've got 90 days worth of renovations, what does that put me off, guys, till the spring? Now, when I list my house and I have it staged, right now, what are the average listings sitting in the market for? Is it 30 days, 60 days? Some of them I've seen 90 or plus, right? So it might be, before I find even the right buyer, 30, 60, 90 days. Then after they say yes and we all agree on a deal, it's another 30 days till closing. If I make that deal today and we shake hands on it, I'm not getting cashed out till midsummer, best bet. Could be a lot faster, but that could be a typical time frame from a large scale renovations. So what we do is we want to price what the house is not worth today, but what's it worth in 6 months from now. So I'm taking 20% off is what my ARV is. So if I figure it's a $400,000 house now, I figure my ARV is 20% of that. And that's where I'm backing the rest of my equation into when I'm presenting my offer. I don't want to get stuck on a property. So these are some of the things that we've been doing. Every market's going to be a little different. Here in Florida is going to be different than upstate New York or the Midwest or California or Texas. That's why I say if you have questions, definitely want to drop them in here because it's going to make a difference, right? Because houses here in Florida that are these 1,500 square foot ranches that are $1 million, they're sitting on the market. Interest rates have doubled in the last, 7-8 months. With that being the case, they're literally sitting and prices are starting to drop. Houses in upstate New York, that's the same size ranch that sells for way over what we still thought it would, is still happening in that market. So for all those upstate New Yorkers, I know there's a bunch of you guys in here, there's opportunity still everywhere. Even in Rochester to make, 90 grand on a deal that she didn't even fix and flip. She just did a clean out, and the clean out cost $2,500 because there's like 3 huge dumpsters worth of stuff in the house, but it cleaned up well. So what we're doing is now, what about the terms deals, Joe? Because that's what we're all here for, create a finance playbook, right? So what happens when we buy a house on terms? So, and this is what Ron LeGrand and I were just chatting about last week. He said, when you buy these houses on terms, you're buying them where? And I said, we buy them over the whole state of Florida. And we buy them all across the country too. And he says, what do you do with these houses? I said, we put in a tenant buyer like you taught us to. He said, great job. He said, so if you're buying these houses all over the place, you're not driving all these, are you? I said, nope. He said, so how are you seeing them? I said, pictures and videos, live video walkthroughs, things like that. He says, but Joe, what happens if they didn't disclose to you something? And this is also what he taught me. So guys, when we buy these properties, especially on terms, we are buying beautiful houses in beautiful neighborhoods. Okay. Most of these houses are typical seller, especially right now, recently just bought their house a couple of years ago and are selling it. Most of them just got an FHA mortgage on it in 2020, and they're now relocating or something like that's going on. So these are typically beautiful houses in beautiful neighborhoods. But the best part about it is, guys, when we're making these deals and we're buying these properties, we're buying with very little to no money down. And most of the time, we're just covering closing costs. The deal that Jen just signed for yesterday, it was $1,000 down to the seller and just a couple thousand in closing costs. And that's what it was. Right. So we bought a house on terms with $1,000 down here in Florida. So if you see our house in Lakeland, Florida, that's the one that we just officially signed for yesterday, $1,000 down. So now what happens if we didn't see this house and we go there and it's not what deemed to be? I always come up with what happens if there was a fire breathing dragon living in the house, right? And we like, oh my God, I can't take this house, guys. What are you out? You could deed the house back to the seller and you're out a few $1,000s. Worst case scenario. This is why I love creative finance. That's your worst case scenario. You could give it back and say, no, thank you. I did not know about this fire breathing dragon in the basement. I'm going to deed the house back to you. I'm out my closing costs. No harm, no foul. Now, my flip side of that is, guys, what happens if you went and bought that same property and you went to Wells Fargo and you took out a loan on that property, and then you'd say, wow, Wells Fargo, guess what? I went to the property because I bought it sight unseen. Because a lot of people do. Investors buy property sight unseen in Florida all the time, right? And I didn't know there was a fire-breathing dragon in the basement, so I'm going to deed that back to you guys. I can promise you it doesn't work that way. And you're going to have problems. So once again, with creative finance, what's the worst case scenario that could happen is if you do buy a property and it wasn't properly disclosed and you find something out bad, right? There's a crack in the foundation, splitting the house in half, and they never told you that because it was buried under the floor, right? You could deed the property back, you're out a few $1,000s. So key here is why we love buying on terms. You have very little money into the deal, guys. You don't have credit into the deal. Two big factors. This is why Ron was literally giving me high fives, because guys, he's a multimillionaire time and time over. He's on his 4th private jet. He is still in a lawsuit from 2008 when he and some of his partners were doing large commercial development using his own credit, using his own money. And what happened was people were backing out of these projects. And when the economy was crashing and money was drying up and the buyers were all going away, he literally had to give all the stuff back to the bank, millions of dollars. And they're still chasing him 12 years, 14 years later for that. So this is why he says, if looking back on it, knowing what I know now, you definitely want to learn how to buy with creative finance, right? So if he was working on that project another way, he might not have had that. So what do I learn from folks who've been in it for 40 years? He says the same thing. You need to buy with what's called non-recourse debt. If you don't have that written down, write that down, please. Non-recourse debt. That means if the deal goes backwards, guys, what can they come after? They can't come after you personally. They can only get the property back. Non-recourse debt. That is going to be your savior when crap hits the fan, right? You're not going to get garnished. You're not going to come have people knock on your door. It does not work that way. And so when you have a 40-year-old or 40-year pro at doing this, and this is what he recommends and says, this is what you have to write your Bible on as far as creative real estate goes, non-recourse debt. I shall not use my own credit or debt to buy real estate. Should be one like the 10 real estate commandments for creative finance. That's number one. So when we're buying virtually, this is why we could do it that way. Make sense? Okay, so when we assign these deals virtually, when you're buying a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood, whether I'm putting in a tenant buyer, or whether we are going to assign that to maybe one of you guys or another investor, what we do is we make sure that we have the house cleaned out. Usually you're going to spend $500-ish. But then what we do is we put a lockbox on the door. Nothing too crazy. We usually send it right to the seller. We have usually a couple different combinations we use. We give them a little video on how to program it and how to put it right on the door. So they put the lockbox on their own door. If the house is vacant, super easy. If they still live there, it's a challenge. Usually have to set up showings separately. But what we're going to do is if I'm going to buy this property and I'm going to close on it like Lakeland, we have the seller put a lockbox on the door. We have the people go there, do a clean out. That was like $200. She did a great job. And now at this point, we have the lockbox combination. We put our ads on Craigslist, Zillow, Facebook. We put up yellow signs all over Lakeland right now. So the phone's ringing. People want to go see the property. So what we do when they want to look at it is a rental, or for what we do is a rent to own, we have a standard list of like 3 or 4 questions we ask. 1, if you're looking for a rent to own property. 2, how much do you have for a non-refundable option deposit? Can you afford them? What's the most you could afford for your monthly rent? We want to have an idea because we're also going to have more properties in that area. So if maybe this is the right one for them, I might have one coming. So we ask a standard questions. Once we get back those answers, if it looks good, we get on a phone call. If they say I've got no money and I can't afford your monthly rent, there's no sense on me getting a phone call, guys. And I don't do this. Jen doesn't do this. We have folks who help us, but we don't get on a phone call. We only will get on the phone calls with somebody who sounds like they're ready to go or pretty close to it. We're get on the phone call, we're going to show them the property. Now, what do we do to show them the property virtually? You're probably thinking. We send them there with an appointment. So now I've talked to Tom and Mary, and Tom and Mary want to go see our house. So Tom and Mary sent me their information. They've got the money. They're ready to move now. They like the pictures. They want to go see it. So we set up an appointment for tomorrow at 2 o'clock. They go to the property at 2 o'clock. I say, great. When you're there, you're going to FaceTime me. And I'm going to walk through the property with you like I'm standing right next to you. But you're going to be there. I'm not going to be there. And I'm going to give you the lockbox code once you arrive. I'm also going to get a photo of one of their driver's license. Write that down if you're going to do this virtually. So now we know who's been to the property. They're there live. I'm going to FaceTime with me. What I'm not going to do is just give them the combination and let them go in there. You want to know why? I know you're all thinking, why, Joe? You don't want them stealing my stuff, right? House is empty, guys. There ain't nothing in the house to steal. I want to hear the oohs and ahs, or I hate this place. And then more importantly, I want to make sure these people lock the damn door on the way out. You'd be shocked how many times we've gone to one of our houses and the door just swinging wide open because they left didn't even close up. You would be surprised. So what we do now, process, right? It's all about process. Once they're there, we get on a video, we give them a lockbox. They get in the house. We're sitting there for 15, 20 minutes. One of our team members is, and we're here to answer any questions that they have live. See if they want the application, and then most importantly, lock up. Now I don't have to send the "what did you think" text message and emails, and they either ghost me or I don't have a feeling for it. The minute they walk in, you're going to hear the wife or husband or kids or somebody like, "Ooh, this is great. Ooh, wow, look at this." And that's what you're listening for. If they walk in and they're like, "Oh, hell no," you know what you're up against, right? You know they're probably not the best bet, and that's okay. You don't want to have their messaging for the next 6 weeks. "Where'd you guys go? I thought you liked it," right? You're going to know right away. Then after that, we send them the screenthetenant.com link. They fill out their application right there. How many of our tenant buyers, hon, would you say that we've met in the last 5 years? Any?
Oh, 5 years, probably like 5 years ago we did, but not as of recently, no.
We don't meet any of them. So we have folks living at all of our houses across the country. We've never met. And if we were to walk into the grocery store and accidentally bump shopping carts, neither one of us would know who the other is.
You don't even know their names.
I don't. I do know if they pay or not, though. And that's what's important, right? So how can you do your business virtually? Whether you're a wholesaler, whether you're looking for a property to buy for a rental, guys, you let technology be our best friend by getting lots of photos, asking good questions. In the last 3 years, has the kitchen been remodeled? In the last 3 years, has the roof, windows, bathroom, all of the big things, have they been redone in the last 3 to 5 years? Are always my question. Because if the answers are no, you know it's already going to be not terrible, but it might not be modern. If you look at then we start getting into more questions, more photos. And these are the things, guys, where you do not need to go to these properties. So if you're going to be doing cash deals and you're going to buy this, and you're going to buy this to fix and flip yourself, and you're going to use your own funds, can you do it out of state? Absolutely. You're going to get a quote from contractors, guys. This is exactly what we do. I get recommendations from other investors, or I look up who are the good contractors in town who've got good reputations, and I usually get 3 or 4 different quotes. So when I have my quotes, I have a good idea if they're all falling in the same range roughly of the scope of work that needs to get done to the property. And if all the numbers fall in line, guys, we make these deals all the time. Now, I will say one of the strategies that we're doing now that we have changed, we are really not doing any fix and flips. If anything, what we have been doing is that we will buy a property that maybe is not beautiful, and we will clean it out. We're just going to clean it, right? Take all the stuff out, get the smell out best you can, make it a lot better showpiece. And then we list it immediately with a realtor. And generally, before we even buy it, I already know what realtor I'm going to use. I already know what price we're going to start at, because what I do, I'm going to give you guys another trick to when we do these properties, especially virtually. I find a realtor who's had either current listings or recent sales in an area. We could go over our mobile home we did in Louisiana. Reach out to a realtor, and I'm buying this property. And when I buy it, I sometimes do a fix and flip. Sometimes I turn it into a rental or even an Airbnb. On this property, my goal is to just buy it, clean it out, and then just sell it immediately as is. So if I were to list it, what do you think it would sell for as is price? Here's photos. You know the area very well. And here's the house address. Once they have that information, they're going to give me my numbers. My second question is, do you have a buyer at that number already in mind? Don't forget that second question. Do you already have a buyer at that number already in mind? Ours did. Right? It was listed for 2 seconds and it was already under contract and sold. So what do we do with the property there? We bought it with creative finance and then sold it retail on the market. Made 20 grand an hour. Right. So these are some of the deals that you're going to be able to find just by scanning either the MLS. You could go on to Craigslist, you could go on to Facebook, you could go on to Zillow, you could pull this on PropStream. There's lots of different ways. You could pull a list into a mailer. There's a lot of different ways to get leads right now, but I will tell you, we are turning into a buyer's market if you haven't noticed. And what's happening is the real estate market is slowing down. So when Jen and I and the team were speaking to sellers in the spring or all of last year, if they didn't like your number, they're going to tell you, I'm just going to list it on the real estate market with a realtor on the MLS. And it's going to get sold opening weekend for over asking. And that's what was happening for years. Now with that market has slowed down, a lot of folks don't have that option. So they're more willing to look at other sources because they're hearing interest rates are going up. They know the market has slowed down and some don't know how badly. So I've had conversations with sellers recently who wanted one, and for an example, in Florida, mom passes away, wants 300,000 for the house, wants 330 for it. It's not worth 330. It's worth barely 300 if it's all fixed up. I gave him a cash offer at 200,000. But I didn't just say my number is 200,000. I explained to him the process. I explained to him what it takes to get to that number of 300,000. Then I sent him concrete evidence of recent sales and recent listings. So I'm supporting all of my statements with facts. I'm not guessing. I'm not shooting from the hip. Houses in your condition that are completely remodeled in your year and size are selling for $200 a square foot. And then we back in the rest of the numbers, right? So in a lot of those situations, guys, I will say if you have a seller who's in that spot, just because they don't go for your number doesn't mean the house is worth more. You stick to your number and you follow up, period. You know your number where you need to be. Don't be desperate to make a deal. So where I see a lot of folks who are desperate to make a deal, they'll say, well, I'll give you $250 for it. You're sitting on a horrible deal and it won't sell. And you'll be a problem if you go buy it and try to do something with it because you're going to be way in over your head. So find out what the number is and stick to it. The second last part I'm going to share with you guys, and then we'll pop into some questions so I don't take too long. Recently, we just did one in St. Pete, same exact way. So I'll go over another success story. We got a property where the retail on it, I would say it's probably 350. We have it under contract for 170. House needs a complete gut. Needs a roof, needs the insides done. No, it didn't need a roof. Roof is 10 years old. Needed the inside fully done. So we buy it, we list it on the market. I was talking to my wholesaler buddies in the area and they all said, I think it could pull 210. So I knew I was sitting on a nice spread. So I decided to buy that one cash because creative finance wouldn't work, but I bought it. And then what my goal was to turn around and sell it right away. Got a lot of pictures, got a lot of videos. That was one of the properties I walked through. And one of the reasons why I say you don't have to, is because the numbers were still working. But you do build a little bit more rapport. I will say that by actually seeing the person face to face. So if you can't go to the property, guys, get on a Zoom call with them or a video chat, because seeing each other in person, you're going to build up a better rapport. So if this house is an hour away, 2 hours away, states away, still get on a video chat, especially when you're negotiating the terms, when you're building your rapport with them. Get on an initial phone call. And if it sounds like if it's starting to go down the road of looking like a deal, get on a video chat with them. You will do better. I promise you. So long story short, what we did on this property was we bought it and reached out to all the wholesalers that we do. And we got offers at 220. We had a couple even at 230. So we were sitting on a heck of a deal. I even made a reel about it. Yeah, 230, here we go. And then what we do, so here's the tip of the day, guys. In all of our states, what is the biggest buyers list? It's the MLS. I'm going to cheat and give you just a rule. Okay, biggest buyers list is the MLS. So what we did on that deal was I listed it with a flat fee service. So you want to Google what that is in your state. So a flat fee service for us in the state of Florida is $90. And for $90, it will upload all the photos and description, and it puts that property for me on the MLS. It's listed now. You download an app for the one that we used. And every time a realtor says, hey, Joe, I want to look at this property and set up a showing, it sends you a message and you just hit confirm. Here's the lockbox code. And they give you the date and time they're going to go do it. Now, maybe one of you guys saw it on the MLS and you reached out directly without a realtor. Well, that's what happened to us. And our buyer reached out and says, I don't have a realtor. I'm just a cash buyer and I want the property. Send them the text. Here's a lockbox code. They do the walkthrough. Comes back, says, I'll take it. $251 cash. He pays all closing costs, no inspections. So we got $21,000 more, plus the difference in them covering all closing costs on that deal versus us having to pay our half at the 230 number. So just the simple fact of having that property and going to wholesale it to our network, because the real number on the deal, guys, was probably 220. That's the real number. Okay. Somebody went and paid 251. Why? Because the market is still the market and there's no predicting what can happen. But if we didn't spend that $90, it's a difference of $21,000 plus closing costs, which are probably a couple grand more. Right. So a little win that we recently had that I want to share with you. So if you're in New York, if you're in Idaho, if you're in Nebraska, it don't matter. Google your state and put a flat fee listing service. And you're going to see a lot of different ones. Some are $299, $199. I got the cheap one. The cheap one, let me put it up on there. I don't need their market analysis and all that stuff. If you want it, you could pay the $100 more and they'll give you that stuff too. I didn't. That is per listing, Wendy. So if you want to list one of your properties on there, for us, it was $90. The best $90 we probably spent in a long time. Right. So these are some of the recent tips and tricks that we've been using that when I even told us to run the grand, he literally stopped what we were doing, picked up his cell phone and took a voice memo and sent it to his assistant saying, Joe just told me about this. We need to look in this. He's emailing me that right now. And then I emailed it to him as we're sitting there talking because he had a property that he's in the same situation. He wants 175. He said, I'm getting cash offers from my investors at 140, 150. He's like, I'm not selling until I get 175. Meanwhile, this guy's got more money than God and he's fighting over $25,000 or $30,000. But hey, it's the game. And he loves still playing at his age. So get it, Ron.
So you were just looking in the mirror, several years down the line.
Another 30 years down the line, I'll be doing the same thing. I know it. Exactly. It's a thrill to chase. But either way, I said, Ron, if you want to get this to a much larger buyers list, do this. And knowing him, it's probably already done. So I should follow up and like, hey, how'd it go? But these are some of the tips and tricks. Realtors are great. I'm not saying don't use a realtor. If you have one, great, use one. I don't have one that covers all these different places. And in this market, coming to find out, I don't know if I needed it really, right? So I'm not saying you don't need realtors, but this is just one thing to consider when disposing your properties. Cool. So the art of buying virtually, when you have a little to no money into the deals, the ones that you're holding because you bought them on terms, what's the big deal? No worries for me. I've got a lot of videos. I got a lot of pictures. I'm good to go. I might have sent an inspector through just to do a 18-point check. The 18-point check should cost me maybe $100, not the $600 inspection where they're doing the whole thing. And then, honey, maybe what we could do, just a little fun, if we have that 18-point checklist, we could share it on our Creative Finance Playbook, the page, our group, I mean.
Yeah. And I got to say, I'm not picking on you, Joe, but you make it sound so easy because you've done this so many times. But I remember when we went to do our very, very first one, I was a little nervous and maybe you weren't, but I just know I was like, the first one was an hour outside of our house and we had done everything in Rochester, New York. And, here we were like, oh my gosh, can we really buy a property? Not in the town. We could drive an hour, but it was just overcoming that first one. And that's all it took. And I just want to give you guys that extra push. Like it's totally possible. So yes, now we've created our entire business virtually like that, but it just takes that one property. And so have faith in yourself and just take that step. And with the checklist and everything that Joe, all these amazing tips Joe just dropped, like you should be able to have enough steam to just go ahead and do it now.
And thank you for bringing it up. That is a great point because I was nervous. The first one was in Buffalo, New York. It was an hour from us. Seller reached out on terms. And I said, well, that's an hour. But then I thought about it. When we dispo or sell our properties, we're selling them rent to own. We're putting in tenant buyers who are giving us a large non-refundable option deposit to move in. They're responsible for all the maintenance and repairs. So we don't really have anything there to worry about. And then that opened up the whole game for us, guys. So I'm going to share with you one last thing now that Jen brought up a great point. We live and buy a lot in Florida. I like Florida a lot. Some of the challenges in Florida, it's hard to find cash flowing properties here. I mean, for the prices of what these people have recently bought these houses at, even at these 3% interest rates, their mortgage payments down here are high as hell. I mean, super high. And then when you look at rents go for in the area, there's not a huge spread. And I'll be honest with you, some of our best deals, some of my favorite properties are in these inexpensive markets. Pennsylvania, some of these properties in Ohio, Indiana, a lot of these places, upstate New York, everybody hears New York. New York City is like this tiny little spot. New York State is this big, huge thing, okay? New York City has all the $1 million properties. Everywhere else in New York State, our average home prices in Rochester, Monroe County are probably under 200 grand for your average typical home. Those properties in Pennsylvania that we could buy, not in Pittsburgh and Philly, but in the middle of the state, that are $90,000 properties that we buy on terms. So what's the closing cost on 3 grand? We own a property. These properties usually have about a $500 payment. We usually rent them for about $900 to $1,000 a month. I'm making great cash flow on these $90,000 properties as we do on these $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 properties. So just because you live in an area that is a challenge, some of you to cash flow in, doesn't mean there's still not great areas out there, guys. They are everywhere. They're even in Florida. They're even in the hottest markets because the thing with creative finance, the value we create, I buy the terms we negotiate. So we are able to have much lower payments than typical because of creative finance. So there are still ways to cash flow by us having lower payments. And then not only that too, by having creative options when selling the properties like rent to own, we're able to build in more cash flow there than typical too. So the art of finding deals where nobody else can, and then making them to big money makers, that's the gift. That's the art. That's why we're here sharing this with you guys. This is exactly what we've been able to do. A lot of investors say, I can't figure out how you paid that much for the property. You guys way overpaid it. And I'm like, well, I didn't pay cash. I paid terms. And you should see how low my payment is. Right. And how much I'm cash flowing a month. And I bought the house with no money down. And they gave me a really long term. So I can stretch and pay more because every other box checked out amazing. Right. So, and then you'd be surprised how many of these deals that we still have free equity in. The one in Nunda Boulevard in New York, seller wanted 300,000 for it. So would you do any less? He said, I'd do 290. We bought it with $100 down. That's it. 30-year term, $100 down, 5 grand total, including closing costs and the 100. Bought it for 290. We sold it on a lease purchase for 400,000. Turnkey house, needed nothing but smoke alarms put in it. We had to take some stuff out of it, just as light cleaning, right? But we solved the seller's problem. He did not want that house anymore. He wanted to get rid of it in a bad way. It was a Airbnb. It was costing him a crap ton of money and he wanted it gone. So we were able to do that. It's been one of our best deals. So he's got 60,000 of equity left in the deal that he's giving us 30 years to get us cashed out. And I will tell you a tip that Ron told me. I didn't even share this one with you, hon. So you want to hear one fresh off the press?
Oh, yeah.
So I'll give you how gangster Ron the Grand is and why I love him. So Kat, I hope all you guys are all listening to hear. Jay, everybody. So Ron tells me your seller has $60,000 of equity that you're going to give him, and you have 30 years to get him cashed out of that number. I said, yep. He says, then why don't you call him now before the Christmas season and just offer him 10 grand today and call it square. He was like, because a lot of people would love 5 grand, 10 grand right before Christmas. And then he says, you just call the rest even. He was like, you'd be surprised how many times that happens. He's like, that's called the deal after the deal. So I should call him up and say, hey, listen, I know I owe you 60 grand. but I have 30 years to get you that 60. No, it's the holidays now. Would you take 5 now and call the rest even? The worst thing they're going to say is no. They might say, give me 10 and it's a deal. And then shipping them 10 grand so quickly. So get $50,000 for free, right? So now you end up buying it for 240, maybe even better. So yes, Ron is that guy. And when we were chatting with Ron last, he also was mentioning a deal that he just got under contract on a $500,000 home. He said, I have 5 years to get my seller cashed out. He says, I'm going to tell him now, or I'm going to tell him in 5 years from now, but I ain't getting him cashed out in 5 years. I was like, once again, he's still going at it. So he's been doing this for 40 years, guys. And there's a reason why he's done the things he's done is how he negotiates. He's very dry. He's a very matter of fact, but he knows his facts and knows how to work a deal. So just things that we cannot do when buying a house on the MLS, walking into Wells Fargo with my 20% down, and then putting in a renter who's going to give me a security deposit. And that's just crazy. So when you realize how I used to do it, or many people have before, there are a lot more creative ways to make large chunks of money. I'm going to get into the Q&A next, but one fun fact I want to share is Ron just talked about a deal somebody in his office did where they were, now this isn't something that I do, but he was just sharing with a win. So I want to share this with you guys. Somebody in his office because he's the art of buying real estate with no money down, finds a deal to where they do a development project in Connecticut with self-storage. He manages it from Florida. He said, not him, but the guy he worked on this, said he's been to Connecticut a total of 5 years in the last 2 years to get the property built, to get it rented, to get it stabilized, and then just sold it using none of his own money because he used everybody else's money to fund the project. He's now sold it and cashed everybody out. And he said, walking away from multi-millions on one commercial deal. So any news for you guys? Ron talks about his commercial boot camp. I could tell you what I want to join next. I want to learn how to do that stuff too. But he says there's amazing opportunities in commercial as well as these single family homes. There's just opportunities galore. So the whole thing is what tracks success, guys. It's not having money. It's not having, you don't have to be anything special. You just need to learn the right strategy. And if you learn the right strategy and learn how to implement your brain power, you can make as much money as you want. And it's incredible what things people are doing in this real estate business. So for all of you being here on a Tuesday, I certainly appreciate it. I hope I could bring a ton of value and share some good wins. I'm going to start opening up questions now. And let's get some of this cracking. What do you think?
Awesome. Yeah, you had some great questions coming in too, like right off the bat. So
We always do. You guys are awesome.
Oh, I know. I say that every week. Thanks again for if you haven't yet, drop it in there where you're at so people can connect with you. All right, Jesse in the very beginning said, can you write up a sub-2 on a FARBAR contract? FARBAR.
Yeah, it's just your standard county contract. Yeah, that's what we mostly do them on. That's the ones I actually recommend to do them on, because here's what's going to happen. I do have my standard like 1-page purchase and sale agreement, and it does cover all of the bases that we need to have it covered. But the challenge is if somebody says, hey, Joe, I want to show this to my attorney. The attorney is going to use to look only over the same purchase and sale agreement that comes across their desk millions of times, or a title company sometimes, right? But usually an attorney. And if this one looks way different than everybody else, now they have to stop what they're doing and they have to read the entire thing versus checking the standard 3 or 4 or 5 spots they normally check. So this causes more work for an attorney. And you know what happens when you make an attorney work more? They're probably not going to like what they're seeing. So what I would recommend you do is find out which standard, like when I was back in Rochester, our county was Monroe County. There is a typical standard purchase and sale agreement that's from Monroe County that all the realtors use in the town. That's the exact one I would do. And the neat thing about all of these purchase and sale agreements, there's always a spot for seller finance or some type of subject to all right on there. Either it's on the purchase and sale agreement, guys, or it's an additional addendum that goes with that agreement. So please remember that. Either it's on that agreement, but I have seen in some other states where it's not on the agreement, it's an additional addendum for checking that you're purchasing with seller finance, but it'll usually show right in the very first box is like your price, but it's gonna, second box is usually gonna be, how are you paying for it? Are you getting a mortgage? Are you cash? Or is there other or seller financiers? Usually that box, I will check that box out and then fill out what the terms look like. Great question.
And don't let that stop you. I think that that really holds a lot of people back because they don't have this contract, this elusive piece of paper. And I think that we get in our heads because we're worried or we're nervous. But again, you know, it's just getting the deal, making sure the numbers make sense. And if you have all of that, you know, you will be pointed in the right direction of what paperwork to use, especially by your local attorney or like
Yeah, and I have it checked over once, make sure it accomplishes what you do. If you're going to plan on assigning that contract, just make sure there's not language in there stating that you cannot assign it, right? Just make sure that if you're going to assign it, and just because you're assigning it doesn't mean you have to assign it to another person, right? So for an example, if I put the purchase and sale agreement that Joe Delafave is buying the property, but I'm going to assign that to an LLC at closing. Well, maybe I don't have an LLC open there. And because I'm buying this property, I'm going to open a new LLC, right? And if that's the case, that could be why I need to have the ability to assign it. Because I will tell you, I'm not personally going to sign and put the property in my name, if that makes sense. So I write on my purchase and sale agreements that is going to be me or my LLC or a signee. Great question.
Yeah, I think some questions are coming back to our student who had the house you're talking about. There's a little confusion on like, why would you not do a sub 2 wrap? Was because you're keep equity and gain interest, or also how did that student pay for the property, the 92,000? I'm just kind of clarifying.
Okay, so yeah, let me clarify on that a little bit more. Originally we talked to the seller and we said that we would prefer terms. He says because of emotional things and because of mom passing away and there was other kids in the family, they needed a cash sale. They needed a cash sale. We still tried with terms. I even brought to him, well, what if we lock it up for 92,000? We buy it with seller financing. And then we put it on the market right away and sell it. And when we do, we pay you back your 92,000. Lo and behold, I think there were some liens against the property that were going to be such a high dollar amount, it almost didn't make sense. So then what we did is we went, then fine, if that's fine and terms don't work and we were to pay all cash, then now what's the least you would take? And I think that's originally how we moved him from a higher number down to 92,000. So we settled on 92,000 and the deal was so good. There's money lenders out there. And I told my student, if you want to partner in the deal, if you need money, please let Jen and I know because we could help you with that. But she had money lenders all on her own already set up, probably family, that she had the money to close on it. So you're going to need 92,000 plus closing costs, which are probably another 3,000 to 4,000, probably 3. So she's into it for a little over 95,000. She had to pay 2,500 in a clean out, an insurance policy. She's all in for 100 grand. All in.
All right, and Adam was asking, do we ever do sub 2 assignments?
Adam, that is a great question. Yes, we do. We do them often. We have one available right now in South Carolina, but after just talking with our dispo team earlier this morning, we might not have that one available anymore. That one is a nice deal. Does need some work though. Subfloors are a little rotted. The furnace is a gas and there's no AC in a house in South Carolina. Little lady owns it. House has been vacant. Her son used to live there while going through college. He moved out a year ago. House has been sitting there vacant ever since. So she owes like 52 on it. Really just wants $1,000 down and take over her payment, which is like $500 a month PITI. And that thing will rent for probably 1,000. Once you give that thing a little love, I would probably guess, because it's not a very large house. It's a brick house. So if I were to update the inside subfloors or just really in the kitchen, because the rest of it was hardwood floors, you could probably be into that thing for well under 20 grand. And have a nice house that was going to be able to cash flow.
Yes. hopefully that gets taken care of today. If not, we might still have it. Property, if it needs a total rehab, would you still lease option as exit, or would you sell via contract for deed instead?
Great question. So what Ron, the king of, is lease option everything when you're selling. Because if your deal goes backwards and your buyer, I'm sorry, your buyer, whomever stops paying you, what's faster, to foreclose or to evict? In most states, it is to evict. In the state of Texas, you can't do a rent to own, so you'd have to sell it on contract. But to foreclose in Texas is like 30 days, 45 days, super fast. So you're just fine to do it there. But much other than that, if it is that, what I would do is I would buy it with creative financing, and then I would offer it for sale as a handyman special rent to own. No banks necessary, do the work yourself and save thousands. That's literally what our ad says.
But that's the cool thing. That's why I call it the playbook, because you might run one play and it doesn't really work like you planned. So you might shift gears and decide to just do a clean out and list it and not stick some tenant buyers in there after all.
Well, we've had those situations. I mean, I'll go over a meth house if anyone wants to hear a good one.
A meth lab in the garage, wasn't
It was in the garage.
We didn't know.
We did not know. Seller sells this house last year and says to us, Joe, I want to sell you my house. I'll sell it to you for $80,000. Takes all the videos, takes some pictures. It's in Freedom, New York, in Cattaraugus County. So it's a little bit further out there, very rural. Definitely could see some meth labs going on out there. You couldn't, but I'm sure they're everywhere. So long story short, we put in a tenant buyer who gives us a large non-refundable option deposit and first month's rent and moves in, and then just stops paying us. I don't know why somebody would give you $10,000 and stop paying you, but it happens. So if it's going to happen, I'm glad she started off with $10,000 versus first month's rent and security. So lo and behold, she does call us up one day, freaking out because there's a SWAT team outside of her house, because the previous seller who used to live there, well, her daughter lived there and her daughter's boyfriend used to live there. And her daughter's boyfriend got arrested for what? Making meth in the garage, which we did not know. So long story short, they're there looking for him because guess who didn't show up to court? She says he doesn't live here anymore. They leave. I call back the seller and she's like, oh yeah, I probably should have told you about that. Garage used to have some meth in there. And but that's not going on anymore. I'm like, yeah, I probably should have known that. So our tenant buyer finally gets evicted. Everything already got cleaned out because we have some amazing people. So, and they didn't see anything in there. So I don't know if it was previously cleaned or whatever. Long story short, we put it on the market. We're thinking about now our tenant gets evicted. We do a clean out. We put it on the MLS. We sell it on the market. House is spotlessly clean now. You couldn't tell that anybody even lived in this place. And we went back to the seller and said, well, obviously we owe you this. If I were to get you cashed out now instead of down the road, because we're thinking of selling it, would you take less? And she did. She took $18,000 less. All right. So that turned a no money maker into a very good money maker, even though it was still a shit sandwich. Right. So how do you turn a shit sandwich into something delicious, as gross as that sounds? The deal after the deal. Thank you, Ron the Grand, once again, because this is the guy who told us how to do this stuff. Right. And why did we negotiate that deal after the deal? Because she never told us that there was a meth lab in the house previously. If not, I wouldn't have bought it for $80,000. But the best part about it is, guys, I didn't buy it for $80,000. It only cost us $2,500 in closing costs to buy that property. Wasn't much. That's why I love creative finance. So what happens if you buy a house on terms, then you find out there was a meth lab in the garage after you bought it? I could have deeded the house right back to her if I wanted to, but her main job was to sell that house, and we helped everybody out there. So we still turned it into a win for everybody. And that's the name of the game, guys. And if you do real estate right, everybody should still win. She's collecting a very nice check still right before Christmas. So I know she's thrilled, and I know we are too.
Yes. Adam, another great question. We are still the homeowners, right? If we're doing a lease option. So are we providing the smoke alarms upon move-in to the tenants?
Every time we have smoke alarms, we are OCD about smoke alarms, guys. Go on like Walmart.com or Lowe's.com, buy them in bulk if you need to. But here's the one thing I will say, and you're talking to a couple, Jen and myself, who had a fire at one of our properties.
Mhm.
You want to know the gut feeling you have when you get a phone call and you answer it, and it's the fire marshal. And he says, "Do you own the property at so and so address?" I said, "I sure do." He said, "Well, it's currently on fire." I will tell you that phone call is not going to be in your top 10 best favorites ever. It's probably going to be in the lower end of that. Lo and behold, turning back, nobody got injured, nobody was home. Our tenants did it on purpose. It's a different story. But the greatest thing about it is when he told me, he's like, when we pulled up here, he was like, every smoke alarm was going on in the house. Why? Because there was probably 50 of them in the place. And it's a 1,300 square foot house, guys. It's not big. But I put a smoke alarm in every room there is. The basement, because upstate New York, we have basements. I put a carbon monoxide detector on all floors. So if it has a basement, a top floor, whatever, I'm putting them on all the floors. And you should too. Don't be a cheap ass and try to save a $25 smoke alarm and have a fire go off in the property and you did not do what you were supposed to do. Because I will tell you what, if you ever had to deal with insurance, you will know that they do not want to pay you. They do not want to pay for stuff no matter what. So cover your bases, make sure you do everything right, and you could sleep good at night. Don't be cheap on the smoke alarms ever. Even if I'm selling it on seller financing, knowing me and how I am, I still want 20 smoke alarms, not 20, but one in every bedroom. I want one in the living room. I definitely want one in the kitchen. I want one in the basement. If there's an upstairs, I want one up there too, and carbon monoxide on all three. And I'll be honest with you guys, I almost lost family members to carbon monoxide poisoning. You don't smell it. You don't really even know what's happening all the time. But my grandmother and my grandfather and my two cousins were so sick, they were crawling to the phone to dial 911 because they didn't know what was going on. All they know is my grandma and grandpa couldn't move. My cousin couldn't move. They crawled to get help and they were all really messed up from it. So why? There was not a carbon monoxide detector in the garage or in the house, I'm sorry. And they had a generator running outside because they lost power during a snowstorm and it was coming into the house and nobody knew. If they had a carbon monoxide detector, that thing would have gone off like crazy. They could have got out of the house and that could have been. Now, imagine if it didn't happen. So lucky it's one of your rentals. Because I will tell you, you don't know what your tenants are doing when you're not there. So get the ones that they can't replace the batteries in either, the 10-year ones, not the ones because they pull those 9-volt batteries out of there and they go put it in the remote control or something. So don't give them that option. Get the 10-year ones. I've found the best value of going on, I think it was Lowe's, and we buy them in a bulk. It's usually a little bit cheaper that way, but please, please, please do yourself, do your tenants or tenant buyers a favor. And that's one thing you never want to cheap out on.
Yeah, I mean, as far as a fire extinguisher, I know Sean's throwing that in there. You could, nothing hurts, right, guys? So always be on the safe side and use common sense and just make sure you're checking in on them too, especially if you like hear from your tenant and you hear like chirping in the background. We've had that. Contractor, send over.
Yep. Yep. So we want to make sure that that's always, always, always a good thing. And then if you do the 10-year battery ones that are all enclosed that they can't even remove, you don't have to worry about checking in to see if they've been replaced or not with the batteries. Because they're in there for a long time. And then the one thing too is somebody did bring up great point is to put a fire extinguisher, usually like in one of the kitchen cabinets next to the stove, right? Maybe one in the garage.
What can happen so easily? A little oil drips in your oven.
How do you know that, dear?
I heard it happen sometimes.
She heard it happens, guys. I will confirm she's correct. I don't want to explain how, but my girl do know what she's talking about.
Oh goodness. I'm a good cook too.
Yes.
All righty.
But great point.
Yeah, those are really great questions. And safety is just, I know it's something that is a little scary, but just always err on the side of caution for sure, especially with human beings, as we are interesting creatures. Alex had a great question. Do you screen the tenant before the virtual walkthrough or after? And the answer really is both. So when we have our tenant buyers that we're talking to, we're going to want to screen them in the initial sequence of questions. It's just really to find out if they're ready to own a home and not just rent, and if they have enough money for their non-refundable option deposit, and if they can afford that monthly rent around that ballpark. And then if the answer is yes, and they have a substantial amount, and to us, it's like $5,000 in order to get into a property, we want them to see that property. So really make sure that you can get people into your property that you have available, and they can get in there, like Joe said, and you can be on the FaceTime with them or however you're going to do it, Zoom, whatnot. And you'll see their faces and you can walk them through like as if you're there, and you'll be able to tell if they like it. Now, if they have enough money and everything seems a go, then from there, you're going to want to do a further screening. And we use screenthetenant.com. I'll drop that in the chat. And that will be a little bit more of the background and stuff.
So what Screen the Tenant does is you are not pulling the report. You send them a link, they pay for it, and then Screen the Tenant sends you back the report, about 70 pages, gives you criminal, sex offender, debt to income, verifies income, employment, all types of stuff. Social media, tells you all their social media handles. It's pretty in depth, but to save you from reading 70 pages, even gives you their credit reports, but it does give you the first page, 2-3 paragraph snapshot of what you're working with, right? And make sure all the back end and front end numbers align, what the turnaround time would be for credit repair if needed. Could be 6 to 12 months, could be 18 to 24 months, depending on how bad their credit is, things like that. And they give you that whole report. So it is fantastic. We did do a live interview with Paul Ritter. I think he even came to one of these a few weeks ago.
He wants to come back. Yeah, he wants to have another one with us. I think so we can speak to our tenant buyers more. The last one we did was investor friendly, I think.
Okay, yeah, good idea.
The link I just dropped there was the personal one that Paul made for us. So that's actually like the investor link where it says apply pre-qual team. That link right there, if you save it someplace for yourselves, that will pull up the fields where you are literally put in all your company information and everything, so that you as the investor don't have to pay the money. It's when your tenant buyer goes to get screened, they would be paying for all of that. And we weren't aware of that in the very beginning. So we were actually paying $50 per person per application. So that is a little gift from us to you to not do that. Save your money in your bank account and have your tenant buyers fill that out. And they're really, really quick. They're awesome to work with. They're right out of Pennsylvania. So if you have any questions on that, make sure you send them our way as well.
Yeah.
How do you structure the rent to own? What are the terms?
Great question, iPhone. No, that's a great question. So what we do for rent to own, what we like to do is I like to find out what the market rent is typically going for, and I like to price it around there. I'm not overly inflating my rent because they're rent to owning the house, right? If the house area rents for $1,500, typical, my house is going to be about $1,500. Could it be $1,550? Could be $1,575. Sure. Is it going to be $1,900 even though the area pulls only $1,500? No. So first of all, I like to keep the rent affordable because it keeps it easier for more people to qualify. Number one. Number two, I look at the price of the house. If it's a $200,000 house today, and I'm going to give my tenant buyer, say, a 2-year term. Initially, I like to start off with when our tenant buyer fills out the Screen the Tenant report, and you find out they say it's going to take 18 to 24 months to get their credit turned around, guys. You have to realize you can't give them 12 months because you're going to set them up for failure and you're going to cause nothing but problems. If you collect a large non-refundable option deposit and you know it's going to take them 1.5 to 2 years, and then you give them 1 year and you kick them out, bad juju, don't like it. So what Jen and I do is I like to give them a 1-year term with the right to keep on renewing it at the same rent for 2 years. You got that? I give them a 1-year term with the right to renew the same rates for 1 more year. Then after that year is up, the second year, because why? If I sell them the house at 200, or if it's a $200,000 house and I predict in 2 years it's worth 225, I'm going to sell it to them at 225. Right? And now what's going to happen is I'm going to give them the 2 years to qualify for that. And I'd rather start at 225 because sometimes that house might be worth 250 later on and I get pinched in the ass. And there are some times where the house is worth 225 like I predicted, and sometimes it might be worth 210, 215. I could go back down if I need to, but if you have a large down payment, non-refundable option deposit, that helps. But what I do is I'm going to price that house at 220, 225. I'm going to collect market rent. My goal is to have $1,500 a month go toward the rent, and then anything they pay above that is going to get added to their non-refundable option deposit. So my goal is to get them more per month. We always ask how much more can you pay over your rent, and usually we get a few $100s more every month. So then, therefore, I could build in a higher rent, get more cash flow, but it's by them and what they can afford. I don't want to hit them at some super high rent that they can't afford. I would rather them pay me on time every month at a little bit less than go high and then have the sporadic payments and late payments. And I know Jen would too. So we will attempt to get 10% down from whatever that purchase price is. So guys, if my purchase price is 225, I'll spoil the party. We're looking to get 20 to 25 grand down. Okay. Now, if somebody comes to us and says, I only have $10,000 down, we will still show them the property and tell them, however, you're going to need more, but I still want you to look at it to even see if it's something that would even excite you. Because if they got $10,000 down and they go see the property, they might find a way. If they fall in love and everything fits well, they might be able to borrow it against retirement plans. They might be able to borrow from mom, grandma, family member, take out a loan, whatever it is. There's lots of different options that they can do. So if they have 10 grand, but I need 20 in the back of my mind, I'm not going to tell them 20, but I'm going to say with rent owns a lot more than that, but go look at the property. You have a good start. If it's something that you like, let's see what we could work out. We send them everybody. Because if I tell you it's $20,000 and you only have 10, you guys might not even see it. You don't fall in love with it. You don't go, the deal sits there forever. So these are some of the techniques that we do. If you have remote holy cow, got a thunderstorm going on here.
Like a rogue lightning strike over here.
Yeah.
It scared me.
Me too. I saw this big flash. You could tell we're both home.
Oh
So either way, that's what we do with our rent to own. We're gonna put them in there for 2 years. At the end of 2 years, if they have not cashed out, guys, we still do not kick them out. You don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. We like to keep them in there. We are going to probably revisit the terms and pricing and rent, get it more up to standard. So the price probably goes up. The rent probably goes up a little bit, but I don't try to kill them. I try to keep it affordable.
We've had 4 purchase outright so far, I think, right?
I've gone through our process and purchased it.
Yeah, they've gone through
That's
it.
the neat thing about what we do, guys, is on the backside, yeah, we get that big money up front from that non-refundable option deposit, like we wholesale a deal. We get that monthly rent every single month without having to worry about maintenance calls and all of that stuff, repairs, like a landlord. And then once our buyer buys us out at the end, that's where we're going to get our large back end check. But we avoid a 6% realtor commission because we sell it directly to our renter. And we hold them more than a year. So then therefore we avoid the short-term capital gains and get taxed a little bit differently. Not much better, but for our sakes. But for some people, it's a big advantage.
We are not like Ron. We do not have an escrow serve handling the payments. We have an in-house property manager and she does everything right now.
She's quitting soon though. So
She is quitting. We're finding her replacement, but at this point we're doing everything in-house. I think because we don't, with the property management, it's not that we have a lot of repairs and maintenance requests by any means. It's more of just staying on top of incoming payments, outgoing mortgage payments to the sellers and all of that. And just kind of keeping utilities on and off, whether we've just acquired a new property, which reminded me I've got to get some on here on our newest acquisition. So yeah, we've got everything in-house. And then to piggyback on that, at the end of the term, do you sell it via traditional and use a bank at that point? So you exit the deal? Yes, we do. And that's why we've found great luck with an amazing loan officer who understands creative, because that's where the hiccups happen. Is if people don't understand it, they'll tell you it can't happen. But when you find the right folks, like magic seems to just happen really quickly and seamlessly. And that's really like the name of our game is, not cut corners, but cut out all the extra junk and let things happen as quickly and smoothly as possible. So,
well, and the point is too, it really goes down to a mortgage underwriter. And I will share with you some of the issues that the underwriter runs into once in a while is that we collect a $20,000 option deposit 2 years ago. And you want to use that money now towards the purchase 2 years later. So some lenders, I don't know why, get confused with that. Some lenders don't care. So it's really knowing the right lender, because if their credit and everything else lines up right, it's usually never an issue. So it's really knowing the right lender, because we've done them through Quicken Loans, and then we've found a mortgage guy who's licensed in a handful of states. And every single time our tenant buyer reaches out to us and says, okay, we're ready to go, This is the best thing about what we do. We've already collected enough money up front. There's nothing stopping us usually besides their credit. Once that problem gets fixed, they're ready to go. All I do is connect them with our mortgage guy, and within 30 days, Jen's getting a big old check in the mail. That's simple. Or it's a wire now. They're not even as fun anymore. You don't even get to hold them. It's just a wire transfer. But yes, that's what we do. The one tip I will say, if you're going to do a tenant buyer, you do receive that initial non-refundable option deposit. Do not write this down. Collect it in cash. Do not. You need to show proof that you've received that money to your lender. If you receive it in cash, holding up a picture with you and all this hundreds isn't good enough. I promise you. I can't say I tried. No, I'm kidding. That doesn't work. But what we do is we create the file. So if Joe's buying the house, we're gonna have a Joe file. Joe's driver's license, Joe's application, Joe's screen the tenant, whatever's in there, Joe's copy of his first initial check, front and back, all in there. The mortgage person says, hey, Joe, I'm ready to get somebody qualified. I just send them the file. Say, there you go. Get at it. The original agreements in there, all in there. But keep that check copies front and back. Don't collect cash.
No. The buyer is aware that deposit will not go to an EMD. Yes, question mark.
So that goes towards the purchase once they execute the contract. If they default, they do not get any of that money back. They are 100% aware of that. Not only they are aware of that, we do not sign somebody up at the kitchen countertop for this property. We do not. They go to an attorney's office. We have the attorney go line by line with the tenant buyer, the agreement, to make sure they understand fully what they're signing. They hand the money to the attorney, and they even pay the attorney $300-400 for their time. They pay it, not us. So when our tenant buyers show up for their closing, which is just them to move into the rental period, they're going to show up with their option deposit. They're going to show up with first month's rent, and they're going to show up with the $300-400 for the attorney service to go over line by line and spend the 20 minutes going over the contract that we've already explained to them. So that should go pretty darn quickly because they know the deal, and the attorney's just confirming with them that they understand everything. And this is why if the deal ever goes backwards and you ever do need to go to court, they can't say, well, Jen never told me about this, or they never told me about this. Well, they signed it with an attorney. And what better witness to have in court with you than an attorney? Right?
Absolutely.
High level stuff there, guys. The successes and the small details, like I said earlier, it's the strategies that are the difference. And this is a huge one I just shared with you. So I hope you got that.
Yeah, and as far as some of the system, the automating of our processes, I think that as you get many more properties and a lot of things are happening, or even if you have your one property and you need to get through a lot of tenant buyers, as far as that goes, it's just using what's out there, like services like Pat Live. It's a 24-hour, 7 days a week. When they call in, somebody's answering, and they will ask a series of questions. So you'll get an email, so you'll know who to call back, and maybe who, if you don't have a ton of time, doesn't have a lot of money, you can skip them for now and come back later if possible. Really trying to utilize things like Facebook Messenger. You can, in our business page, we can have a couple different auto responses that are there. Our CRM is another tool that we can automate things with, even with buyers. So there's different tools out there, just finding what you're going to use and what works for you.
For years, Jen and I would post ads all over Facebook Marketplace and all these different groups. And then you have 100 people a day, 200 people a day reach out to you with the, is this available? I swear, if I see that one more time, I think I was going to just like go nuts. And then we'd have this copy and paste message. We'd be like, yes, it's available. Here's a couple questions, see if it's a good fit for you. Please answer all 3 of these questions, because if you don't, I can't help you. And if they don't answer, they don't get any help, period. And I want to jump forward real quick, so if it's okay. Adam asked, but what about signing agreements with sellers? Why kitchen table with sellers and not an attorney like with tenant buyers? How I buy is different how I sell. So I could have an agreement written up with myself and a seller. Now, in the state of New York, an attorney is going to have to look over that purchase and sale agreement anyways. I'm just outlining the initial terms that we're agreeing on, because if I have to show and tell my attorney, hey, I'm thinking about selling my house, they're going to need to know the terms of what you're selling on to look at it. But the one thing I will say, when I am buying a property, an attorney's job, and this is where I ask my seller, are you looking to get financial advice from your attorney, or are you asking him or her if this is legal, what we're signing and doing here? Because if they're asking the question if it's legal, I'm buying your house. Purchase and sale agreement, it's all spelled out. If you're asking for financial advice, that's a different question, right? And I don't know if your lawyer is built for giving financial advice, or maybe you should talk to a financial advisor. But these are some of the things that I looked at, because a lot of times what attorneys do is they step their bounds and they start giving their folks financial advice and not legal advice. What happens is on our tenant buyers is they could give you a large non-refundable option deposit, and they could say, well, Jen never told me that's non-refundable. And now your word versus their word in court. There's no closing. It's just a contract. It's a lease agreement with an option rider. So it's not even like an official closing that gets filed with the county or anything of that nature. So Jen didn't tell me it's non-refundable, and I had to move because my job transferred me and I want my 25 grand back. You're going to have an agreement, but now you have to go to court. Once their lawyer, if you get subpoenaed, were to send you a letter stating that you guys would have to go to court for this, and they find out that they had the paperwork signed in front of an attorney, they probably won't even take it to trial. They will probably just tell the tenant buyer, you have no case, because I didn't have them sign it. I didn't put my elbow over the paperwork. I didn't force them. I wasn't even there. I wasn't even in the building, and we never are. So wasn't coerced, wasn't forced, wasn't tricked or duped or any of those things. They know what they're getting into. So that's why we do it that way. And then on the flip side, with our buyers, with our sellers, it's all done through title. It's all done through official closings. We have a CYA letter, cover your ass letter, to make sure that they weren't drunk, they weren't on drugs, they weren't tricked into it. And we have them sign that stuff too. Not at the kitchen table, but we do have them sign it at closing.
All right, Trace is asked here. Sorry, Trace, I'm not ignoring you. How do you handle when an on-market property, the seller wants 50 to 100K down for a seller finance or sub 2, but he's finding that the agents are kind of a roadblock here? Are there any suggestions we can give him as far as that goes?
Yeah, so we've done this before. You're right. Agents could be great. They can be difficult too. That all depends. So first of all, if I have a seller who wants 50 to 100 grand down, my initial thought is they want too much money down. So I just was working with our new team. If you guys didn't see, we hired somebody here in Florida. Her name is Lexi. Lexi is 24 years old, 23, has no real estate experience. In 2 weeks, she's already grasping how to look at these things. So what we do is, and you guys are going to love this, we're dropping a creative finance deal analyzer tool. That once you put in the cost of acquisition and a couple quick things, it's going to tell you the rate of return on your money. And it's going to give you these ranges where if it's in this range, this is a great deal. If this is in this range, this is a bad deal. And then this is a phenomenal deal. Like, go knock on their door now, right? So what I look at is a higher cost of entry is going to give me a lower return on my money. So how I explain this to the seller. So, and I have a lot of this going on right now, guys. So Trace, you're not alone. A lot of folks reach out to us, say, I have a property I want to sell. They answer all the questions. And then we look the property up, and there it is listed online with an agent. So we've had this happen not too long ago. Seller says, yes, I will do terms. I moved out to my fiance's house, and this house is sitting there vacant. My realtor's not selling it. We said, would you do seller finance? She says, yes, I will. We typically buy with no money down. She says, fine. I reached out to the agent and said, your seller wants to sell us the house. She reached out to me. I did not reach out to her. And she said that she'd do seller financing. So seller financing means I'm going to buy it subject to, I walked them the whole process. We made the deal. We closed it. We paid them a commission at closing. Now, if a seller wants 50 grand down, 100 grand down, we always say nicely beat it. Not going to do that. But how we go about doing that is the gift. So we explain to them that we are buying the property as is. We do pay our half and your half of the closing costs. And because we do pay at close to the top of the range, we typically buy with no money down. So if I were to give you a small down payment, what's the least you would need? I'm going to get that number. I mean, guys, you should just literally quote that and just text that to them or rehearse that in the mirror like 5 times and then say it with conviction on the phone. And then you're going to find out what that number is. And then you're going to ask them, what do they need that money for? What do you need the money for? Is it you just want it? Do you have a goal in mind? A lot of times you're going to see that they might have a goal in mind. Some they just don't, right? But I've had, and this is where I say, a lot of the times we've had people who want 50 grand down. We've had some that want way more, that we've got to like 5 grand, 10 grand, who started at 80 and 90. So what will change? Time. Their house maybe not selling, right? So maybe I talk to that realtor now, or I'm going to talk to the seller if the seller's already been in direct communication with me. And I'm going to tell the seller that I would love to buy your house. I want to buy it. I love the area. I love the property. But because I'm going to pay top range for it, and I'm going to buy it as is and cover all the closing costs and fees, I need to buy that with like no money down. So if I were to give you a small down payment, what's the least you would need? And I'm going to go with that number. Then I'm going to say, is that the best you can do? And they usually wiggle a little bit more. You're muted, honey.
I see that. Sorry. Some of our students and yourselves, like you've brought some of these huge, super high down payments down to reasonable amounts.
Well, and that's the difference of just asking those few questions. And then here's, like I said in the very beginning, if the numbers don't work, that doesn't mean the property is worth more. You stick to your numbers and you resubmit the same inquiry offer or whatever it is in another 30 days or 2 weeks or whatever your time frame is, depending on how hot or cold they are. But I'll just keep at it. And persistence. My wife did a reel on my daughter today.
That's my story.
Or a story. They're all the same thing to me. About persistence. She's at gymnastics, not hitting her stunt, and over again, the girl that just did not stop. She just repeated, and then she hit it. So that's just what it is. It's persistence. So if you guys ask that person one time and then you never follow up with them, you're going to lose the deal. But if you follow up with them 30 days, say, hey, it's just me checking in again. I know what you had last month about your house, and I told you I could pay top of the range for it, cover all the closing costs and fees and buy as is. We just need to get that down payment down. So in a reasonable matter, so we can make that deal happen. No, I still need my 50 grand down. Cool. See you next month. Right. And then you just have a great follow-up system. Whether you have the $12 accordion style 1 through 31 that you put the papers in that you know to follow up with them every month on the 15th, or you have a cool CRM. I don't care, guys, how you do it. The money and the profit, and I'm giving you it, is in the consistency. And I can't say that enough. And the lack of organization and the lack of consistency will kill you. Even if you have all the know-how, all the gumption, all the passion for doing it, if you don't have the consistency, you're never going to be where you need to be. I promise you. So follow up is key. I've been in sales.
As I'm sitting here, we're getting some photos from our virtual purchase in Niagara Falls. The contractor has officially finished, never walked the property. All good news.
Isn't that beautiful how that happens? So
Yes.
Cool. Great question. But 50 grand down for me is too high. I want to look at my total rate of return on my money. And sometimes I'll even tell folks, listen, if the rates weren't so high at the bank, a lot of times I'm able to get 3% down. And on your $500,000 home, it's like 15 grand. Is that going to work for you guys? If I have to tell them a number, if I have to tell them an offer, because that's what I'll try to do. I stay away from offering all the time. I will ask questions and get the information back. Ask questions and get the information back. And that's what I really have worked very hard on. Not me just saying, I'll give you 25 grand down. Well, if you ask the right question, guys, they might give you 10 and you just, Great question. So yeah, the buyer is aware the deposit will not go towards the EMD. It goes towards the purchase. We answered that one. Any tools to that you
Talk
use?
about that. I think we just have two left here. Can you explain the process of signing agreement with the seller? Who is the buyer on the, who is the buyer on the agreement? Do you form a land trust prior to creating the purchase and sale agreement?
So what we do is the land trust gets formed at closing. It's just a couple pieces of paper, usually like 5 pieces. So what I will do is if my goal is to buying the property, now Jen and I buy a lot of properties. Some we keep, some we wholesale. If this is a property that we're going to take down and it fits all the boxes, but just maybe not the area that we're going to keep it, and I'm going to wholesale it, I'm going to have it is that it's going to be my one entity, which is an LLC, that we keep it under contract and then we assign those contracts, right? So I'm going to write it under that entity is the buyer. So if it's Jen Buys Nationwide LLC, I'm going to put it Jen Buys Nationwide LLC is the buyer or assignee. If it's a property that I'm going to keep, and I know that Jen and I are going to keep it, the deed is going to be transferred or put into a land trust. So what I'm going to do as the buyer, I'm going to put that property's land trust name. So what do? I'm going to tell you guys, it's super tricky. We have a super sophisticated way of naming these properties. We name it the property address. So if it's 123 Smith Street, it's 123 Smith Street Land Trust. I know you guys are shocked right now. Pretty amazing stuff, but that's what we do. So if the address that we're buying is 123 Smith Street and so wherever, I'm going to put buyer is 123 Smith Street Land Trust. Seller, seller's name, property address, prices that we determine, the terms, closing dates and times. I put in there we're buying as is. I have 21 days of due diligence still built into every one of my contracts. Period. Great question.
Mhm. And then as far as finding contractors, well, the one I was just speaking of, we actually know him because he was from our area, but some obvious places would be connecting in some of these Facebook groups with other investors. So even in our group, we encourage you to ask those kind of questions and hopefully we can find some really great people that way. You can go into Facebook groups in that town and really word of mouth. You want to talk to a couple different people, try to get some recommendations and reviews. Not everybody you hire will do the right job. We've got stories, fun stories on that. So, sometimes you don't get a winner and sometimes you get some really amazing folks. We even hire people to go and put up some yellow signs when we have rent to own. There's just a job for everybody out there. And it's just, again, you want to try to screen as best as possible, do your due diligence and, pay them a fair amount as well, because I do believe that sometimes people aren't paying as much as they possibly should. And that work will show, but then sometimes you'll pay a lot and you get nothing out of the deal. So,
guys, and I'll say and that's just touching on what Jen said, just because you get a referral from one of your friends or another investor, that contractor can still rip you off. And it has happened to Jen and myself.
Yep.
For a lot of money for roofs and things like that. So I tend to go by recommendations. I tend to go by gut feelings. I also look them up on Google. So if I don't know the area and I'm looking in Orlando, Florida, I'm going to look up contractors in Orlando, Florida, and I'm going to find some of the ones who have the best reviews. I'm going to find the top 3 or 4 of the companies in there, and I'm going to all have them give me a quote. I would rather at least get a quote at that price so I know what it's looking at. Maybe that still gives me a little bit of time to find a better price if their quotes are kind of high. I try to find not the huge companies. I try to find the companies who are smaller, so they don't have as big of enough overhead. When the guy shows up in $120,000 brand new dually decked out 3/4 ton, Texas Cadillac, I am scared shitless, because I know that thing costs him a lot of money to pay for every month. And I know, guess who's paying for it? Me. When I find the guys who show up and they're dirty, they look like they work for a living and their truck looks a little dirty, but they have super great Google reviews and things like that. And they're clean on the job, because I'm very particular about that. Those are who I like.
I would say Google reviews are huge, because if you don't do any review background checking, you don't know what you're gonna
I'll
get.
tell you what, the guy who ripped us off didn't have any Google reviews because he wasn't that kind of company. So,
Well, I was even thinking about the one that dumped everything in the cemetery up in Watertown.
oh geez.
Forget
And
about them.
yeah, so we paid a company. We bought a property in Watertown, New York. It was full of stuff. We paid a good reputable company to go do a clean out until Sunday morning when the seller called me and she says, "What the hell is going on? I just got a call from the state police that all of this stuff in my house is piled up in a cemetery." I said, "What are you even talking about?" She's like, "Yeah, all of the stuff that was in my house is now not in the house. It's in some big, huge pile at the cemetery." I said, "That's impossible. I just talked this morning to the people who are doing the clean out. They're there now doing it and they're getting rid of all the stuff." So I called the company who's doing the clean out. I said, "Guys, do you have a dumpster there?" And they said, "No, we don't have a dumpster. We're putting on a trailer and we're hauling it to a dump site." I said, "Is that dump site a cemetery?" They said, "Well, of course it isn't." I said, "So then where are you dumping this?" And they told me the address and it's like 2 hours away. I'm like, okay, this doesn't sound right. You could have had a dumpster there. It's in a city. You don't need it. There's no dump site that's 2 hours away. You guys are obviously dumping it. And then lo and behold, they were. So even though you find these Google reputable companies, boy, you'll still never know. So I always say stay away from big, gigantic flips. If it's small stuff, cool. And I'll be honest with you guys too, even with like flooring, I'm not going to lie, Home Depot installation does a pretty decent job and they're going to be there, period. So that's another tip we like to do. And then you'll always find their subs. They'll say, "Oh, I'll work for less." Well, if you show up and if you don't rip me off, right? So sometimes just going through Home Depot can be a savior, or Lowe's for installation and stuff like that. Great question.
It was crazy. Yes. All right.
I was
Last
thinking about
thing.
the roofer who
Oh,
ripped us off, and we had to give him like $8,000, and then
yeah, he disappeared. Fun times, but that's the thing, right? Like we're still breathing, living, working. We didn't give up on this business. It's just part of the gig, and it makes a heck of a story.
and Sean, you were right. Bacon grease can be a MFer because bacon grease is what caused the fire at our property. Our
Yep.
tenant buyers were cooking bacon and then put the pan back on the stove and then walked out the door for work. Didn't know that they left the electric stove on. Yes, they did. The whole flames, charred cabinets, smoke alarms, all went off. $80,000, not in fire damage, in smoke damage. Because
Yep.
now all the walls, all the everything stinks like smoke so badly that I don't know how Jen walked in there. Because when I did, I would gag and almost throw up every time. So the fact that she did like a video in there, if you guys dial back years ago, you'll see her in there. I don't know how she's able to talk and be in that house. It was horrible, horrible smell.
I didn't go in when everything was still in there.
I think you did a live one time.
That was true. I feel like passing the plate for this live class. Wow. How do we get you Starbucks? Hey, we are always accepting Starbucks donations. No, yeah, you live, you learn. We also did a whole live on some of the mistakes we've made. You can check that out too. We've got tons of our lives. They go right up onto YouTube. I don't chop off any of the questions at the end. I really think that they're super valuable. But with that, I know we are really excited. We've got some big, huge news coming on Thursday. Our pre-sale for our 3-month program is launching. So if you're not on our list, please make sure that you are. If that's something that you want to take this to the next level. If you're here for the lives, that's awesome. Keep coming every Tuesday at 2. We are going to still be here Eastern. But that's for that next level of education. If you're just looking to really crank up your business, maybe it's leave your W-2, maybe it's just one house a month you're looking for. That's really the goal here, is to help those who are super serious for that next level. And I'm really excited for this. This has been in the making for years now. Where is the playbook? It is on its way. And so
Never
Thursday,
seen stuff before.
yeah, brand new, brand new.
So I'm super excited about that too. We come here every Tuesday live because we love to share with you guys what it is that are currently going on in the real estate world, currently going on in our business, and part of the mastermind groups and all the other events that we go to share with you what we see as the pulse in real estate, some of the advantages and some of the great things that they're doing. And we love to give back to the real estate community. If it wasn't for amazing people who knew way more about real estate than we did, Jen and I would never be where we are. So
Mhm.
anything that we gather from these events that we could share with you, we love to do it. And that's why we do. So look forward to seeing us every Tuesday, because
Yep.
it's what our passion is. And then once again, if you do want to learn more, like I kind of chatted about before, it's really on the strategies. And if you really want to dive deep into marketing strategies, structuring strategies, how to make money on these deals once you have the deal, because that's the super important part. Now you have the deal. What do I do with it? Like we break it all down into such detail with checklists and stuff like this. Like you guys will be blown away. I promise. And that's coming out really soon. So you'll see more about that. But either way, next Tuesday, if you have any recommendations that you would like to talk about, please, 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 if you have any other questions in the meantime, send them our way. And if not, guys, appreciate you being here on this amazing Tuesday. And we look forward to having a good holidays and have a lot of good things to be grateful for. And I will tell you, 2023 is going to be like no year I think a lot of us have seen in real estate in a very, very long time. I know I'm super excited about it. I know our team is super excited about how many deals that we're going to be able to make. And this is going to be life changing. So if you really bunker down on this creative finance in the next 12, 24, 36 months, this could be a life changing event for all of you. And even Ron LeGrand, who's been around for 40 years, guys, he's been doing real estate before a lot of you were even born. I know I was like 3 when he got started. And I will tell you what, he says this is going to be an opportunity that you don't want to miss on. So pretty house business is what he calls it. It's just learning how to buy creative finance. We buy even ugly houses with creative finance too, because a lot of those deals make sense. And that's how I told them to structure their deal. So I came and shocked Ron LeGrand, which was pretty awesome. So I hope they share that live somewhere, because he was like, I actually stopped him and stuttering. He said, no, no, why would you? Yeah, that's a great idea. So we have some really cool techniques, guys, that are working. We want to share them with you. So looking forward to it.
All righty. Well, Merry Christmas, everybody. If you celebrate, happy holidays. And we're excited.
We'll see you guys next week.
I was going to confirm, are we going to be here next week? We're going to have a full house, so maybe we have to go to the office.
I'll be here next week. I promise.
Oh, gee, you're going to leave me.
No, you got to come too. You might want a break.
All right.
We're
Well, take
hosting
care.
the holidays, so we'll have a whole house full, but it'll be fun.
All
So we'll
right.
see you guys next week.
Bye, guys.
Bye.